When he was at breakfast, the emperor called in the under-governor of the chateau. He was a former captain of the gendarmerie elite, whom I had seen at Rio Seco. Well, and the Holy Father, the under-governor, gave an account of various things concerning the Pope's life and of everything that was said by those about him. It was a long and very interesting report. Unfortunately, my memory has not been able to preserve the details. There was a small room between the emperor's bedroom and the salon. A valet de chambre remained in this, near the door of the large bedroom, to open the door of the cabinet, or the salon for the emperor. I was on duty in this room during the discussions which took place on the occasion of the Concordat. The discussion was very animated. The emperor spoke vigorously, half in French and half in Italian, and with an abrupt articulation which indicated impatience. I could not catch any phrase. The only word I heard distinctly was Santo Padre, which the emperor repeated frequently in interrupting the long arguments which the Pope made to defend his interests. The voice of His Holiness was so low that I could hardly hear it. The discussions were animated and lasted a long time. From time to time, Monsieur Joanne, the stenographic secretary, would come out of the room and go down to his office, from which he would return almost immediately. I do not know whether it was that day that the Concordat was signed, and whether it was that day also that the banquet was to be. The table was set for dinner as usual in a room which the emperor used as a dining room, and which was at the end of the salon and the gallery of Francis I, but with this difference, that the table was much larger and more magnificently decorated. It was there that the great banquet to which the Pope had been invited was to take place. At the appointed hour, the table was laid, the dinner was served, the servants were in their places, but the Pope, for whom they were waiting, did not appear. The emperor and empress were in the salon a quarter of an hour. Half an hour passed in this way without the Pope's appearing. Finally, the emperor, annoyed by such a delay, came out of the salon with the empress and took his place at the table. The persons who had been invited took theirs. The dinner was silent. Few words were exchanged. The deepest displeasure was painted on the emperor's features. What could have prevented the Pope from coming? In the eyes of everybody, it was a very great piece of impoliteness, a failure to observe the most ordinary decencies. I learned that the Pope, who had a service de bouche from the imperial household, ate only boiled eggs. He was probably afraid that he would be poisoned. This was not the case with the prelates who composed his court. These gentlemen did justice to the good cooking. It seems that during the first part of the Pope's detention, the public was allowed to be present when His Holiness said Mass. The attendance was so great that the government, fearing that under the appearance of great devotion some intrigue hostile to it would be formed, thought wise to forbid the public going to chapel. As soon as the emperor had finished with the Pope, he returned to Paris. I do not remember whether he went to live in the Tuileries or went to the Élysée. If he did not go to the latter at once, he went too soon, liking to be free in a walk. When the empress was made regent, the emperor made her be present at the councils. I doubt greatly whether that was very agreeable to this princess, who I fancy more than once felt like dozing instead of listening to the deliberations of the councilors and ministers. Ever since his return from Russia, the emperor had been actively employed in creating a new army and resources for himself. For all that had escaped from that fatal campaign was very little in comparison with what was necessary for him in order that he might face the enemy with any chance of success. The best of the soldiers who had been saved from the shipwreck were in the fortified towns of Germany. All the material of the army had to be reconstructed, the cavalry to be remounted, the wagon train to be formed anew. The emperor was obliged to make very considerable sacrifices of money and France of men. The emperor did not lose a moment. He neglected nothing to show that the empire could still fight against the united forces of Europe. As all the troops who were to constitute the new army had gone to their posts, the emperor left for Erfurt and was soon in contact with the enemy. I left at Mainz. I do not know why. I should have much preferred to make the campaign. Towards the end of May, I received the order to join the emperor with a number of wagons which had remained at Mainz. When I reached Neumark, where headquarters were at that time, the armistice was on the point of being signed. One might say that it had been 2 or 3 days afterwards. The emperor left for Dresden, and all the household and the guard went with him. The armistice had pleased everybody. They hoped that peace would follow. The emperor went to stay in the Marcolini Palace, situated on the principal street of the suburb, which was to the east of the city. This dwelling suited him from every standpoint, because at his apartment they were on the ground floor, and he had the advantage of a large large garden or park in which he could walk without being disturbed by anyone. He was as comfortable as he would have been at the Élysée or St. Cloud. Near the afternoon, he would walk in the broad alley till evening. In order to divert headquarters and the court of Saxony from serious thoughts of politics, the emperor sent to Paris for the principal members of the Comédie Française, Fleury, Mademoiselle Mars, Baptiste Cadet, and others whose names I do not recollect. The morning they arrived, he received the celebrated actress at his breakfast. She was almost ashamed at first to appear before him in the condition in which she was, as an accident had happened to her during her journey. Her carriage had upset, and in the fall she had received a blow in the eye which made it quite black. When she had told about her adventure, of which the emperor had already been informed, she recovered her self-possession, but still was careful to cover the unlucky eye with her handkerchief. Whenever the emperor looked at her, she replied excellently to all the questions which the emperor put to her. She remained throughout the breakfast standing, and as the emperor was very amiable with her, she must have been very well satisfied with the interview. I was almost angry that he did not make her sit down. There are circumstances where etiquette ought to be banished. If Mademoiselle Mars's black eyes somewhat affected the beautiful ensemble of her face, the agreeable quality of her voice fell deliciously on the ears of those who listened to her. On the stage, a little white on the black spot caused most of the effect of the extravasated blood to disappear. I'd never seen Mademoiselle Mars close. I observed that she had a little scar in the middle of her forehead after the Battle of Leipzig. I learned that the emperor was in a large town, the name of which is a legible translator. By asking soldiers and officers, I succeeded in discovering the house which he occupied, and which was situated at the back of a little place on the left of the road. The doors were open. Everything indicated that the house was abandoned. It was almost without furniture, and I did not find a single person to speak to. I went into the first room, then into a second. I was about to go into the third when I saw in the fourth, facing the door, the emperor, seated on one of his folding chairs, with his legs stretched out on a common chair, his hands folded on his stomach, his head sunken, his eyes closed. He seemed absorbed in the most profound reflections. Indeed, the terrible defeat which he had just suffered once more annihilated his material resources and deprived him henceforth of any chance of success. This attitude of the emperor wrung my heart and brought tears to my eyes. Never had I seen him in such a state of depression. I withdrew cautiously and returned to the first room in order to prevent any strangers from reaching him, for there was not a single sentinel at the door.